Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome back. The revised CRP 5 is now posted. Considering that it will take some time for parties to read and digest, we will proceed with adoption of the L document first. If so, I would like let us now look at L2 on the theme on the knowledge component of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. We have earlier approved the CRP. Now I submit L2 knowledge management for adoption. Can we adopt this document? I see no objection. L2 is adopted.
Sorry, there's some confusion.
Okay, the name, right?
Okay, it's okay.
L2 is this one, the role.
Thank you for your cooperation. The name of L2 is the role of in-depth dialogue, the role of language in the intergenerational transmission of traditional knowledge, innovation, and practice. And now we proceed L3 document. The name is Joint Program of Work on the links between biological and cultural diversity, review and update of the 4 adopted traditional knowledge indicators. So we have earlier approved the CRP. Now I submit L3 for adoption. Can we adopt this document? We have the floor from Colombia, followed by Russia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Muchas gracias por la presentación del documento L3. De acuerdo a las discusiones que tuvimos el día de ayer en la plenaria al revisar el CRP, queremos ver reflejado en el párrafo 3, literal E, en la quinta línea, después de Women and Girls and Environmental Defenders. Gracias, señor presidente.
Russian, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Before I come to a couple small editorial questions, can you please repeat the suggestion from Colombia and where it goes?
Colombia, sorry, can you repeat?
Gracias, señor presidente. Con mucho gusto puedo repetir la propuesta. La propuesta es, de acuerdo a las discusiones que tuvimos ayer y tomando en cuenta el lenguaje que estaba en el CRP revisado en la plenaria del día de ayer, La propuesta es incluir o volver a incluir, como estaba inicialmente, en el numeral 3, párrafo 3, literal E, en la quinta línea, después de women and girls, and environmental defenders, and then continues with the from indigenous peoples and local communities, in line with what we discussed yesterday and what we heard from the countries, from the parties. Thank you.
Okay, we proceed with a request from a distinguished representative from Colombia. So we only open the floor for their intervention. Any objection? If there is no objection, please switch off the microphone at first. Only we leave the objections. So we proceed with Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense que le secrétariat a fait un bon travail donc, de récap. Et par rapport à l'inquiétude ou en tout cas à la proposition de la Colombie, je pense que hier, ce n'était pas l'assentiment de tous les pays, surtout pour ce qui concernait donc, les défendeurs donc, des droits de l'environnement. Nous avions suggéré que pour ce qui concerne les femmes et les jeunes, nous trouvons tout à fait pertinent que cela soit gardé, mais pour les questions des droits, des défenseurs de droits et autres, nous avions estimé que ce n'était pas nécessaire. Donc voilà un peu la préoccupation. Donc nous ne sommes pas d'accord pour l'inclusion de cette partie.
Thank you. Russia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. If only on this point, we are of the same view as Togo. So we had extensive discussion on this topic yesterday. And even if language to be a correct one, which environmental human rights defenders and not environmental defenders, we still don't see the relevance here in this particular part. And I think we spent a lot of time yesterday on that. So we hope that we can stay as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Swatini.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I also want to join the previous two speakers in saying we wouldn't agree to the insertion of what Colombia has inserted. That is specifically because our understanding of what is currently reflected in this document in subparagraph E is what we could at least find common ground as parties. But everything else outside that is what we couldn't find a common ground. And we wouldn't want to spoil the good work that has gone into us finding that common position that we currently have. And we strongly believe that reintroducing this particular aspect, which we strongly believe doesn't really tie well with what this this particular subparagraph is trying to do is actually watering down all the good work and all the effort that we've done in coming up with the compromise text. And we want to further remind ourselves that what we have currently there is not anyone's position, but it's what we agreed during the discussions, that it's something each one of us can live with. Thank you.
Thank you. Chidi.
Thank you, Chair. We support the proposal of Colombia, and in trying to find consensus, we would like to suggest to adequate it to the language agreed under the Target 22 of the CAM in Montreal GVF, which said, open quote, environmental human rights defenders, stop. Thank you so much.
Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente. En consideración a lo señalado ahora mismo por el orador anterior y teniendo en mente la meta número 22, así como los procedimientos que se han seguido en esta reunión, donde hemos tratado de acomodar las posiciones de todos los países, yo mantengo la propuesta hecha por Colombia, incluyéndolo, dejarlo entre corchetes, toda vez que demuestra entonces que no nos hemos puesto de acuerdo, pero no perdemos la idea de lo manifestado por la representación de Colombia. Muchas gracias.
Canada, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'd like to plead with you as chair to have a little bit of discipline here. This is an L document situation. And so what our opinion may or may not be as a delegation on this issue is irrelevant. The only thing that's relevant is what this body agreed upon at the CRP level. And so if the Secretary could please help us to remind us what was agreed upon, at this moment we shouldn't be introducing new text or anything like that at all. It's only to make sure that the document reflects what was talked about and agreed upon at the CRP level. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. You raised a good point for the discipline of this procedure, because we are proceeding the L document, so there is no possibility to have further comments. With this, I just would like to open the floor. Can we adopt this L2 document as it is? Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Quiero recordar que ayer tuvimos una discusión larga sobre este tema. Se hicieron múltiples propuestas y al final de la sesión no fue claro cuál era el texto final. Es por esto que estamos solicitando dejar el texto que estaba inicialmente en el CRP, que si bien no es el texto que aparece en la meta 22, como lo mencionó el delegado de Rusia, es el texto que estaba incluido en el CRP. Por eso mencioné las palabras Environmental Defenders. Si esto no hay acuerdo sobre esto, quisiera haber reflejado este texto en brackets. Gracias.
Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And indeed, we did have a long discussion on this yesterday, and there wasn't agreement, but we believe that the text you have in front of you is what we... There were different views among parties, but we believe that the text that you have in front of you is the one that reflects what we agreed to transmit to plenary as an L document, as Canada said. And as Canada said, at this stage, we should just be verifying that that is true, that the Secretariat hasn't made a mistake, essentially, on this. We shouldn't be entertaining discussion unless there are things that we have absolute consensus on. We cannot include anything in brackets at this stage because it would make no sense, because this isn't a recommendation to the COP. It's what this working group is asking to be done as of today. So it makes no sense. So we have to agree. If we have more than one view, then we have only really two choices. One is to keep the text as it is. The other is not to have a recommendation. We understand that there were different views expressed yesterday, but now we're at the stage of adopting the text that we approved yesterday. It should be a formality unless we have had we've made an error in conveying what we agreed yesterday back to the plenary. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Can we adopt this L3 document as it is? Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. En efecto, la Secretaría tiene razón en el sentido que el párrafo al que me estoy refiriendo es el párrafo de la decisión de este grupo de trabajo y no la recomendación a la conferencia de las partes. En ese caso, quisiera solicitar que quedara en el reporte la alusión a este tema, incluyendo la recomendación de que en el análisis de gaps que hace el grupo de expertos de indicadores considere los Human Rights Defenders como está en la Target 22 en el sentido de identificar indicadores adecuados para medir el alcance de esa meta. Gracias.
Thank you, Colombia. With your comments, we can adopt this document. Russia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned earlier, we have several editorial things. So same paragraph E, we just discussed on the second line. We made this proposal at the discussion of CRP, and we believe that that's supposed to be addressed. 4 traditional indicators. So we suggested at the CRP stage to delete this number because it doesn't make sense anymore in the new setup. So second point, we like to seek advice from the Secretariat, as for us it's a new form of referring to decisions, adding date. So I don't remember that we did it before, so we prefer not to have dates And I like to draw attention of the Secretariat that across the documents of this meeting, not only in this document. And the last suggestion we also made at CRP stage, the very last paragraph starting encourages. We believe that it will be nice to put number 1 there to make a distinction of operative paragraph from preamble paragraph. And also will look better that at least we have one operational paragraph in this paper. Thank you.
Secretariat, please.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe the correction that the distinguished delegate from the Russian Federation made in paragraph 4E to delete the word for, F-O-U-R, is correct indeed. That should be deleted. Regarding the other points, let me assure you that this document will be finalized in accordance with the guidelines of the United Nations, the editorial guidelines, which do indeed specify that we should include the dates. And you'll see this has now been introduced and will be introduced systematically in line with the editorial manual of the United Nations. Regarding whether or not the lone operative paragraph, it is an operative paragraph that's indicated by the tense of the verb. It is an operative paragraph. We will confirm whether or not that should be numbered in line with the editorial guidelines of the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you. Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'était pour une question de clarification parce que quand la Colombie a fini sa déclaration, vous avez demandé d'adopter le document, mais vous ne l'avez pas précisé si on l'adopte avec l'inclusion de la proposition de la Colombie ou on adopte le document comme tel présenté.
Secretariat, you have the floor.
Oui, merci Monsieur le Président. Juste pour précision, le document a été adopté tel quel, sans modification, avec une mention de refléter le commentaire dans le rapport de cette réunion. Merci.
Can we adopt this document L3 as it is? If there is no objection, we adopt it. Now we proceed document L4, updated the draft acknowledgement management component of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. I would like to ask, can we adopt this document, L4? I see no objection, then this document is adopted. Now we proceed to our document 5, recommendation from the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issue pertaining to the Convention on Biological Diversity. I would like to ask the floor if you agree to adopt this document. Togo, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Il me souvient que par rapport à ce document, nous avions fait des suggestions et par rapport aux préoccupations que nous avons déjà soulevées, en relevant le fait que tout document au niveau donc du contexte de la Convention devrait refléter les principes tels que posés dès la Fondation, notamment le fait de pouvoir intégrer les questions des peuples autochtones ensemble avec les communautés locales. Et sur cette question, la question qui se posait, c'était de savoir la plus-value donc de ce document par rapport à la problématique donc de pouvoir créer quelque chose de spécifique ou en tout cas une décision spécifique au peuple autochtone. Alors nous avions suggéré donc que le titre dans son ensemble ou en tout cas le document dans son ensemble soit donc encroché pour nous permettre donc d'avoir d'amples précisions sur la question et la plus-value donc de cette décision-là. C'est vrai que certains partis ont expliqué que le document ou le titre du document reflétait effectivement le nom donc de l'organe. Qu'à cela ne tienne, nous avions estimé que même si une décision est prise au niveau donc des Nations Unies, cela devait donc faire l'objet d'une appropriation. Et quand on fait l'appropriation par rapport au principe donc de la Convention telle que nous l'appliquons jusqu'alors, cela devait être appliqué donc avec toutes donc les implications nécessaires, notamment l'inclusion donc des communautés locales dans cette décision-là. Voilà pourquoi nous suggérons, sans forcément donc revenir sur le débat, que tout le document soit encroché et non seulement à partir du paragraphe 3. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Please hold on. Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And indeed, this is another CLP where we had a lot of discussion on this at the CLP stage. And of course, there was a lot of discussion on in particular with regard to the second preambular paragraph, but it's been left in the form that it was because we understood that that discussion on that paragraph was superseded by the request from, I believe, Eswatini to put the entire draft decision in brackets. And you'll see that indeed the entire draft decision to the Conference of the Parties is in brackets. There's a bracket before the reference to the Conference of Parties, and there's another closed bracket at the end. I mean, similarly to the point we were making with regard to L2, it really doesn't make sense to bracket the earlier parts. I note that the title is merely the agenda item that we were addressing. So I think given that obviously there are a number of parties here that do wish to have a decision at the COP on this issue, And there are, of course, some that do not, or at least would want to change the text here. That is already indicated by the fact that we have the draft decision itself in square brackets. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. I give the floor to DRC.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole et merci au secrétariat pour les précisions données. Monsieur le Président, un bon chasseur ne chasse pas dans une forêt inconnue, sinon il va y rencontrer des fantômes. Et nous avons dans l'analyse de ce document et cet avant-midi demandé des précisions et des clarifications sur le motif, l'objectif, la raison poursuivie et même la valeur ajoutée de ce document pour booster ou aider l'atteinte des objectifs de la Convention. Encore que tout ce que nous prenons comme décision ici devrait être basé soit sur le cadre mondial de la biodiversité Kunming-Montréal, soit dans le cadre de la Convention sur la diversité biologique et ses protocoles. Ce document donne des recommandations d'une instance permanente et à nous, en tant que Convention sur la diversité biologique, on nous demande de l'adopter. Monsieur le Président, je n'ai jamais vu la Convention sur la diversité biologique envoyer des recommandations à une autre institution et demander que cette institution puisse l'adopter. Pour cela, nous ne sommes pas dans la position d'adopter ce document. Et vous avez dit, Monsieur le Président, que vous avez encouragé toutes les parties à poursuivre les discussions sur cette affaire, alors qu'il n'y a aucune discussion là-dessus, c'est-à-dire on ne peut pas évoluer et avancer avec ces documents, sinon on va se trouver être tiré de tous les côtés avec le risque de vouloir trouver son ventre divisé en deux. Monsieur le Président, pour cela, nous demandons la surséance à l'examen, à l'analyse et à l'adoption de ce document et on va les classer donc sans suite. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Swatini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm raising my flag in an issue of placement. I do understand that this entire recommendation is in bracket, but I just want clarity in terms of the placement of the first bracket. The last bracket is okay, but the placement of the first bracket, in our understanding and in my recollection, Africa made the point that we are not even in support of a recommendation at all, which is why we believe that the opening of the bracket should not start at the Conference of Parties, which means there is disagreement in terms of the content of the recommendation, but we have a disagreement even in terms of do we have a recommendation or not. So the placement of the opening of the bracket should not be where it is, but should be up where it says draft recommendation submitted by the Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Secretariat.
Thank you. So just to note, of course, that this convention has quite often provided requests or invitations to other bodies, and that also the Conference of the Parties has, for a number of times now, considered recommendations from the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues on the basis of discussions in this working group. I wonder if one suggestion that might help reach a consensus here could be if, instead of saying recommends that at its 16th meeting the Conference of Parties adopt a decision, we say consider adopting a decision to indicate that it's not agreed that we should adopt a decision. So I just offer that as possibly as something that might help. But I see there are other requests for it to you, Mr. Chair.
DRC first.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Quand le temps est mauvais, l'oiseau ne vole pas. Et vous avez constaté que tout le temps est mauvais ici. Vous avez constaté que l'atmosphère n'est pas propice à l'adoption de ces documents. Il serait justice, il serait sage de votre part, Monsieur le Président, de surseoir à l'adoption de ces documents. Ainsi, vous saurez établir le jugement qu'il faut. Et c'est de ça qu'il est question, Monsieur le Président. Si vous voyez qu'une nourriture est empoisonnée et que vous voulez à tout prix le consommer, vous pouvez imaginer les conséquences. Et c'est à vos risques et périls. Mais ici, nous ne faisons que vous avertir. Le sage a dit, l'homme prudent va le mal au loin et le prévient. Nous avons vu le mal. Nous sommes en train d'avertir, nous sommes en train de prévenir. Mais si nous ne voulons pas changer d'attitude par rapport à ce mal qui s'annonce, donc nous devons nous mettre prêts à en assumer les conséquences qui risquent d'être irréversibles, et ça sera déjà trop tard. Donc, pour éviter qu'on en arrive là, Monsieur le Président, nous réitérons notre position. Nous ne sommes pas à l'état de valider l'adoption de ce document. Et quand vous aurez ordonné la non-validation de ces documents, vous aurez fait justice, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. And regarding L5, even though we understand the argument from the Secretariat that some of the proposals within the preambular part would have been superseded by the fact that the whole recommendation to the COP is in brackets, we would see an added value in reintroducing the proposal that Brazil and the European Union had suggested as an alternate to the two preambular paragraphs, for the first and the second preambular paragraphs, which would read as recalling paragraph 7A of the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which from our perspective received a lot of support and could perhaps enable a way forward with this document. So we would suggest adding this alternate to the first and second preambular paragraphs. Of course, we understand this would be in brackets in any case, but just to include this for further consideration until COP16 and try to move us forward with this document. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Again, just trying to remind ourselves what we ended up with at the CRP level. And, I take and appreciate the suggestions from Brazil, but I'm not sure that's going to enable us to find a way forward. We were certainly sympathetic with that proposal back at the CRP level, but again, I don't think here we want to get into a discussion and rehash the discussions that we had at the CRP level. Our recollection was that the draft COP decision was all placed in brackets. I think you could probably have a discussion about whether or not that starts at the Conference of the Parties, or it starts at recommends that. I'd be really hesitant about editing those words. I think it's more about where you place the square brackets. But we would certainly not be in favor, as some have suggested, in bracketing the title of the document. The title of this document is the agenda item, and the agenda item was adopted at the beginning of this meeting. Thank you very much.
Togo, you have the floor. Thank you, Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous ne voulons pas revenir encore sur l'argumentaire qui avait été déjà présenté, sauf que dans les explications du secrétariat, j'ai cru entendre qu'il souhaiterait peut-être une proposition dans le sens de dire que nous envisageons. Mais je voudrais dire que, Monsieur le Président, nous n'envisageons pas. Nous n'envisageons pas. Okay, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Then it's Mexico.
Muchas gracias, copresidente. Yo quisiera expresar que efectivamente hay una preocupación de nuestra parte sobre las observaciones que se están haciendo y la propuesta de no someter este documento a aprobación, porque lo estamos interpretando como un retroceso en todas las derechos y el avance que ha tenido la cuestión indígena. Para nosotros, en particular, es muy importante porque estamos viviendo en nuestro país un proceso de revaloración de nuestra herencia indígena, y este documento va en ese sentido. Y también porque como ya lo mencionó Canadá, efectivamente el título fue aprobado, y eso no consideramos que pueda ser metido en corchetes, porque efectivamente fue aprobado previamente, y eso no está a discusión en este momento. No estaríamos respetando nuestro propio procedimiento. En ese sentido, quisiera reiterar la importancia que tiene la aprobación de este documento para reconocer los derechos de los pueblos indígenas, y de no hacerlo tendríamos la impresión de que se está retrocediendo en no reconocer estos derechos que ha llevado años construir. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to Guatemala.
Gracias, señor copresidente. En la misma línea que México, quiero recordar nuestras normas de procedimiento tal como se hizo en el tema anterior, donde no se adoptó lo que había propuesto la hermana República de Colombia. Ateniéndonos a nuestros procedimientos en ese sentido, pido a la Secretaría Ejecutiva y a los presidentes y copresidentes que respetemos nuestros procedimientos, y solamente recordar que el Foro Permanente para las Cuestiones Indígenas, tal como el día de ayer se nos explicó, es un órgano permanente de la Organización de Naciones Unidas que ve cuestiones relativas a los pueblos indígenas y que fue establecido en el año 2000. Es decir, hace 23 años viene realizando una labor de asesoría para que todos los mecanismos de derechos humanos o que tienen que ver cuestiones relativas con pueblos indígenas, tal como este convenio, observen y consideren los derechos de los pueblos indígenas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Quiero hacer eco de las intervenciones hechas por Brasil, Canadá, México, Guatemala. Y me parece curioso que querramos cambiar el título de un tema que no solamente fue aprobado en la agenda de este grupo de trabajo, sino que además fue encomendado por la COP15. Entonces, y adicionalmente se refiere al nombre de un foro de Naciones Unidas, en el que entiendo los países también pertenecen. Entonces, es inaceptable pedir el cambio del título o pedir que se ponga entre corchetes. Llamo también a la disciplina, así como lo hicieron en el ítem anterior, frente al procedimiento. En este sentido, es importante retomar la propuesta que hizo Brasil y que podría ser el punto de consenso para continuar con la revisión de este documento L. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Colombia. Now I give the floor to Argentina.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Quisiera referirme a la inclusión de la propuesta de Brasil que se hizo durante el tratamiento del documento CRP. Estimo que no es una práctica, estimo que es una práctica habitual poder incluir corchetes dentro de un documento más amplio que se encuentra también entre corchetes, y en este sentido estimo que resultaría de valor para la discusión durante la conferencia de las partes incluir la opción de texto que ha tenido un consenso dentro de la región del GRULAC y no perder esta valiosa discusión que se ha tenido sin prejuzgar en los resultados respecto a la totalidad del documento. En este sentido, estimo que debería incluirse entre corchetes la propuesta de Brasil y poder incluir también el texto como se encuentra actualmente entre corchetes, para que ambas opciones estén reflejadas. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to Swatini.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I just want to draw attention and also to clarify what we submitted before. Specifically, Mr. Co-Chair, what we are asking for is not something that is against the rules of procedure, one. Two, what we are doing here is completely different with the discussion that we had in the previous CRP. Here, we are just clarifying and even correcting what we did before when this document was still a CRP document. And what we are saying, Mr. Co-Chair, is not to change the title of this particular document, especially because this is an agenda item that we have agreed to talk about. But what we are requesting is to put the first bracket where it has to be, highlighting the discussions that we had this morning. Specifically, we made it clear through the voice of DRC's Africa Group that what we are not sure of about right now and what we do not agree of is even having a recommendation itself, and which is in that wavelength, Mr. Chair, that we believe we need to correct the first bracket. And again, we want to reiterate that what we are doing here is within the rule of procedures, and it's completely different with what we discussed in the previous CRP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have two comments. First, we believe that the title of the agenda might not really necessarily be the title of the document discussed and agreed under the agenda. For us, the document, the outcome document of the agenda is a package. It's going to be decided by the parties in this regard. And our second, so we don't agree to the interpretation or statement which provides that because we have agreed this term in the agenda and it's final, the document or the title of the document must be as it is in the agenda. That's the first thing. The second thing, there could be also a landing zone for this document. As we have agreed in COP15, we didn't have any preambular paragraph, and everybody was able to accept that, and perhaps this could be a way out to resolve and conclude our agenda today. Thank you, Madam Professor, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to EU.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Entendemos las consideraciones de las distintas delegaciones, los diferentes puntos de vista que en este caso se confrontan. En todo caso, consideramos que es necesario llevar esta propuesta de recomendación, esta recomendación con la propuesta de decisión para la conferencia de las partes, llevarla adelante y vemos con buenos ojos la sugerencia realizada por el secretario ejecutivo en funciones, dejando abierta a la propia conferencia de las partes la adopción de la decisión, es decir, reemplazar the conference of the parties adopt por considers. También en la línea de que es necesario, por supuesto, un mayor diálogo entre las partes para avanzar en este asunto. Por otra parte, queremos apoyar la intervención de Brasil en el sentido de traer al texto entre corchetes la propuesta que trataba de ser una propuesta de compromiso que inicialmente trajo la Unión Europea y sus Estados miembros en el sentido de, en el preámbulo, simplemente hacer mención a lo que fuimos capaces de acordar en el marco global de biodiversidad en la sección C, párrafo 7, letra A. En este sentido también apoyamos lo que ha señalado Argentina de mantener esa propuesta de texto en corchetes dentro de los corchetes generales de la recomendación. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. DRC.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je reprends la parole pour préciser un certain nombre de choses. Premièrement, le Mexique a dit que nous nous sommes accordés sur les titres. Monsieur le Président, c'est faux. On ne s'est pas accordé sur les titres et vous vous en rappelez bien. La Colombie a dit que c'est un point qui figure à l'ordre du jour de la réunion. Et il a raison. Mais l'ordre du jour s'appelle provisoire. Provisoire, c'est-à-dire ça peut évoluer, ça peut être accepté ou non. Le Guatemala, Monsieur le Président, a dit que nous tentons de ne pas respecter les procédures, mais c'est du chantage, Monsieur le Président. Ne vous laissez pas tomber dans ce genre de piège. Sans mentionner d'ailleurs quelle est la procédure ou la règle qui a été violée. Nous sommes assez outillés pour voir les textes et pour voir là où on est en train de partir. Monsieur le Président, je vous donne 2 faits et j'en veux pour preuve. La République démocratique du Congo est assez bien positionnée pour comprendre les tenants et les aboutissants des discussions que nous avons aujourd'hui. Pourquoi? Parce qu'en RDC, il y a les peuples autochtones, en RDC, il y a les communautés locales. Donc la RDC comprend des 2 pieds la situation. Et la RDC vous dit que le premier paragraphe de ces documents sous analyse fait allusion aux peuples autochtones et aux communautés locales. Et les autres ne le font pas. C'est ça le piège, Monsieur le Président. Qu'on ne vous amène pas à chavirer les bateaux alors que nous sommes presque au bout et vers le rivage. Ce qui convient pour sauver la situation maintenant, Monsieur le Président, c'est de respecter la conférence des partis. C'est un organe suprême. La conférence des partis ne devrait pas analyser des documents qui n'ont pas de sens. Ça serait un manque de respect à la conférence des partis que de lui envoyer un document vide de sens et un document qui porte les germes de sa destruction. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to remind parties of Decision 1521, in which we tasked the Executive Secretary to look at issues relating to our convention that were being undertaken by another group, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. The recommendations of that body have been considered, and we've taken them into consideration here in relation to the GBFF. So effectively, we tasked ourselves to do this work. We've brought it back and had a look at it. And now we need to know what to do next. And I think the proposal put forward by the Executive Secretary, which doesn't preclude whether we will or will not have a decision or at COP, enables us to have a further conversation. And I think the proposal put forward by Brazil and supported by other parties as the basis of that discussion is an important one so that we can have a dialogue at COP. My understanding is that without that we are not able to have a further consideration of issues that we tasked ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense qu'il y a un certain nombre de questions qui ont été soulevées qui peut-être m'amènent à repréciser un peu la position telle que nous l'avons libellée. Nous avons parlé du titre, évidemment. Si cela était tel que contenu dans l'agenda, cela ne veut pas dire que c'est in extenso qu'il faut forcément garder un titre, même si cela a été validé de manière d'une autre. Au moment de l'examen, cela peut amener donc à revoir. Ça dépend de la pertinence. Ce n'est pas parce que cela a fait l'objet donc de... Puisque le document, c'est dans son entièreté. Et ce qui commande un titre, c'est son contenu. si nous avons un titre mais qui ne laissait pas entrevoir le contenu, il est quand même de notre devoir de pouvoir souligner si à un moment donné nous avons constaté que le contenu peut être de présenter donc des germes donc d'une destruction éventuelle. C'était important de le préciser. Alors nous ne disons pas forcément qu'il faut modifier. Nous ne sommes pas en train de modifier le titre ici. Mais nous soulignons un fait. Et le fait, je pense que ça, c'est quand même quelque chose de palpable. Alors, pour ce qui concerne la proposition du Brésil, en réalité, nous n'avons pas une objection intrinsèque à la proposition, puisqu'il s'agit donc d'un rappel d'un paragraphe, donc du document que nous tous nous connaissons et que nous avons tous adopté. Alors, mais nous voulons préciser qu'en réalité, même si nous le mettons comme tel, ça ne répond pas à la préoccupation que nous avons soulevée. Puisque d'ailleurs, ce paragraphe en question ne parle pas seulement des peuples autochtones. Ce paragraphe ne parle pas seulement du peuple autochtone, ni des communautés locales. Il y a plein d'autres éléments qui sont en jeu dedans. Et quand vous regardez bien, le paragraphe, si vous l'interprétez en bonne et due forme, le paragraphe C donc de notre cadre, en réalité, on a cité le forum comme un exemple. Ce n'est pas la base juridique pour justifier la prise d'une décision en ce sens. Et quand vous regardez le contenu d'une décision, si cette décision-là peut poser problème, je pense qu'il est quand même de bon ton qu'on puisse savoir comment on entérine les choses. Puisque, Monsieur le Président, selon nous, c'est vrai qu'il y a des recommandations. Une recommandation n'est pas une obligation. Chaque convention essaie d'envoyer des recommandations à l'autre. Et nous aussi, nous avons sollicité, la CDB, la Convention sur la diversité biologique, sollicite aussi la collaboration des autres organes, évidemment. Mais à partir du moment où la recommandation d'un organe nous contribue à l'atteinte de nos objectifs, il est de bon ton qu'on puisse trouver sa pertinence. Mais si une recommandation peut peut-être créer ou en tout cas donner lieu à une décision qui peut présenter des germes de destruction, je ne vois pas pourquoi il faut forcément qu'il y ait une décision là-dessus. Pour terminer, Monsieur le Président, il y a des pays qui ont dit que nous avons connu des avancées et que ce document est un élément fondamental pour dire que nous sommes en train de respecter les droits des peuples autochtones. J'ai dit là, ça veut dire qu'on est en train de remettre en cause tous les efforts qui sont faits jusqu'alors. Si nous pensons que c'est ce document qui va servir vraiment de base pour respecter les principes ou en tout cas les droits des peuples autochtones, je suis désolé. Nous avons plein d'autres décisions qui sont si capitales et fondamentales. Et nous avons donné notre accord là-dessus. Notamment, par exemple, les questions même des organes subsidiaires. Sur cette question, même si aujourd'hui, ça laisse toujours à désirer, à se demander si vraiment c'était pertinent. Mais nous avons fermé les yeux pour pouvoir dire non, c'est important. Voilà des décisions concrètes qui prouvent que nous sommes en train de vouloir prendre en considération les droits des peuples autochtones et des communautés locales. Mais qu'on me dise qu'une décision comme telle, d'ailleurs le contenu, quand vous la lisez, et quand vous le lisez jusqu'à finir, vous demandez à quoi ça sert. Et qu'on dise que c'est ce document qui est si fondamental pour justifier le respect des droits des peuples autochtones, j'en émets des réserves. Monsieur le Président, nous avons simplement demandé que ce document, dans son entièreté, soit mis en crochet, tout simplement. Voilà. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Togo, for your intervention. Now I would like to stop your intervention. As a presidency, China are actively making effort to find a consensus for the discussion. As much efforts as we can. We see there are different opinions, but we cannot give up at the very beginning, as many delegates said. We are listening to every party as much as we can to see if we can grab any opportunity for consensus that could be met. In this case, I suggest we break 5 minutes for consultation. Thank you. Dear colleagues, after consultations, I now would like to propose to make the revision as the following. Move the first bracket to the beginning of the paragraph, starting with the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group. Since we have to finish the work today and have another CRP to consider, therefore I ask for your cooperation and flexibility to adopt this L document, and then we can move on. Can we adopt this document with the revision as I proposed? Indonesia, followed by DRC.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Could you repeat again in a very more slowly manner so we could understand the new proposal? Thank you.
Okay. I suggest to move the first bracket to the beginning of the paragraph, starting with the ad hoc open-ended intersessional working group. Can we adopt this document with the revision as proposed? DRC, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Nous vous revenons avec une bonne nouvelle. Et avant de donner cette bonne nouvelle, je vous donne juste un bref aperçu dans une minute. En ce qui concerne la situation des peuples autochtones et des communautés locales, il y a plusieurs cas selon les partis. Il y a des partis qui ont seulement les peuples autochtones. Il y a d'autres partis qui ont seulement les communautés locales. Il y a d'autres partis qui ont les peuples autochtones et les communautés locales. Et il y a d'autres partis qui n'ont ni peuple autochtone, ni communauté locale. C'est-à-dire avoir à concilier les différentes situations n'est pas un travail facile. Mais cela étant, nous suggérons, et c'est la position également, je le rappelle ici, du groupe Afrique, comme vous l'avez aussi proposé, que les crochets, le premier crochet commence sur là où on dit le groupe de travail spécial intercession. Si on remonte le premier crochet là-bas, alors nous pouvons continuer avec la session. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. With this, we think this document is adopted. Thank you. Before we proceed the CRP 5, please allow us have a little bit time to consult. Thank you. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let us please turn to CRP 5, Rev 1. I would like to check if all your interventions regarding insertions of text that had been revised in the contact group but not reflected in the previous CRP are now in the revised CRP. Any request? Canada.
Thank you, Chair. So before our break, we've indicated that we add some changes to the recommendation on Part A. And we indicated that we would return to this section. And so we didn't submit these in writing. We were under the impression that we were going to return to this section. I just want to clarify this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretariat, please clarify.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a clarification that we will come to that section. It's just a first step to check if what we did before the plenary was adjourned is properly reflected. Thank you.
Okay, then we proceed. We will come back to the draft decision of Section A. But before I do it, I propose that we please approve the annex of Section A. Are there any objections? Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we may, we would like also to touch about the decision of Section A. It is mainly that referring to the footnote, which provides that, which clarifies that we have not discussed part of the decision in Section A, hence we propose to have them in brackets. Referring to footnote, the first footnote before number 1, I think. Okay, and furthermore, on the annex of Section A, again, we would like to emphasize our position that 5.4 and 6.3 is without mandate, both from the framework and from the COP. And this is clarified by the decision we had before us, before this agenda, which even bracket all the references to this idea to distinct or to separate IP and LC. So we propose to have 5.4 and 6.3 deleted. And this is our comment for Section A. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. Since what your concern is already in the brackets, so we will take note what you had pointed. Is that okay? Then DRC, you want to have the floor?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole accordée. Et évidemment, les documents ici que nous avons a eu vraiment suffisamment d'évolution. Nous encourageons beaucoup et nous félicitons beaucoup votre leadership et aussi le travail assidu accompli par les secrétariats pour travailler d'arrache-pied et produire ce document. Mais sur ce document, nous sommes vraiment ravis de voir que la majorité de nos positions ont été reflétées et c'est ce qui est vraiment encourageant ici. Donc, nous vous félicitons pour cela. Concernant les points 5.4 et 6.3, Monsieur le Président, il y a eu plusieurs discussions sur ces différents points. Mais si ça ne nous permet pas d'avancer, Monsieur le Président, la solution qui reste, c'est de les supprimer et d'adopter le document. Parce qu'on risque encore de tourner en rond, revenir sur les mêmes discussions et prendre beaucoup plus de temps. Monsieur le Président, vous êtes fatigué. Quand j'essaie de me mettre à votre place depuis le début de cette réunion, je comprends le poids de la fatigue qui pèse sur vous. Mais si un doigt vous empêche d'atteindre les objectifs, mieux vaut le couper. Ou bien s'il vous fait plus mal, alors il faut le casser et la vie continue. Donc, la RDC appuie cette proposition faite par l'Indonésie de supprimer les points 5.4 et puis 6.3 de ce programme de travail. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Chair, and we thank the Secretariat for preparing this revised version, which we could go along with. We would just flag that in Action 7.2, it would just be an editorial correction because we felt that there are some opening brackets and they don't have their corresponding closing brackets. So it would be helpful to add a bracket after guidelines at the fourth line of Action 7.2 because we do have brackets before develop, but we don't see where that bracket closes. So I think it's just an editorial mistake because I think yesterday we had divergent views on those two proposals. So it would be just an editorial correction because I think they were not captured here. Thank you.
Noted. So I suggest we take a break for consultation since there are some intervention. Okay, let's back to the meeting. I see Indonesia, you are asking the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we would like to propose that 5.4 and 6.3 are deleted because it goes beyond the mandate of us in this working group. As we have seen in the prior session, the idea of distinction or separating IPLC is not even been sent to the COP. So all references or proposals of program of work which relates to this idea, we think it should not be included in the text. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. DRC, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je tiens juste ici à dire deux choses. Je serai très, très bref. La première chose, c'est que nous sommes en plénière et la plénière est habilitée à recevoir le rapport du groupe de contact. Dans la plénière d'hier, je me souviens que j'avais attiré votre attention sur le fait que les procédures suivies en groupe de contact pour traiter la question du 6.3 posait problème. Vous avez promis que la solution serait trouvée en groupe de contact, mais le groupe de contact n'était plus revenu là-dessus. Qu'à cela ne tienne, la RDC fait toujours preuve de beaucoup de sportivité et de flexibilité. En ce qui nous concerne, nous pouvons passer à l'adoption de ce document comme c'est déjà entrecroché les points là. Je vous remercie.
Thank you for your flexibility. Can we adopt this document as it is, Indonesia?
Mr. Chair and colleagues, again, I would like to reiterate again our position that we are against any proposal that are without mandate in our document. Because if we start to doing this, we will be creating things without instruction of our leaders in the COP. So we still insist not to have these two paragraphs. Thank you.
Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Me voy a referir a otro párrafo. ¿Puedo hacerlo en este momento?
So please proceed.
Gracias, señor presidente. Una de las propuestas que se hicieron ayer en el contact group, en el elemento 7 del programa de trabajo, en el 7.2, donde estuvimos revisando perdón, varias propuestas, en la línea 6 del 7.2 se solicitó incluir, después de Human Rights Defenders, with particular focus on protecting women from all forms of violence. Entonces quisiéramos ver reflejado eso que se propuso en el grupo de contacto y que fue apoyado por varias partes. Gracias.
Thank you. Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pense que Je n'avais pas voulu demander la parole pour ce document parce que la plupart des préoccupations qu'on avait soulevées tiennent lieu donc jusqu'alors. À l'entame donc de l'examen de ce document en plénière, nous l'avons déjà souligné qu'on avait des préoccupations pour ce qui concerne donc le point 6.1 et le point 6.3. Nous avions également soutenu la position donc du confrère j'ai oublié, vous me permettez de prêter le nom, de l'Indonésie, merci, pour cette suppression. Nous l'avons demandé et même dans le groupe de contact également. Bon. Étant donné que c'est dans l'esprit donc de compromis, nous avions laissé que cela soit encroché pour que en plénière on puisse examiner de façon beaucoup plus approfondie. Et donc nous réitérons donc cette position vraiment de supprimer cette partie. Pour la simple raison, au-delà donc de ce qu'il a évoqué, nous avons bien dit que nous ne trouvons pas la pertinence d'avoir une action qui va aller dans le sens de faire des études ou des analyses, des questions de séparation entre le peuple autochtone et les communautés locales. C'est aussi simple que ça. Et si nous voulons rester donc dans l'harmonie ou en tout cas dans l'esprit de conformité de ce que nous avons déjà discuté sur le document passé, je pense qu'il est de bon ton qu'une telle action ne soit pas maintenue. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, since we are run out of the time, I propose we put the whole document in brackets. The entire draft decision, the whole document. Any objection? Russia.
So before I raise any objections, just again to clarify, are you talking about the entire document? So you are not opening decision, or you're talking about annex in section A?
The entire document, entire draft decision, not only the annex.
So then, co-chair, we have comments for the draft decision, because that's also was our understanding, the intention to discuss it before lunch. So we didn't make any comments waiting for this time to comment.
Okay, so we first collect all the comments for the draft decision. Australia?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify the placement of the bracket so we're very clear on what part of the decision. Are you referring to the Conference of the Party decision or the two decisions from this meeting? So are you proposing to put the square brackets at the start of A on page 1 or higher?
Secretariat, please clarify.
Yes, good afternoon, colleagues. Since we've had some requests to discuss the draft recommendation in A, we would like to collect some views in the little time that we have on A, on the draft decision on A, and then we sort of go forward with that. But the first step would be please to get your views on the draft recommendation, since there was an appetite to provide those, and we collect those, and of course those will be in bracket, but we'll collect them now. Thank you.
Thank you. Russia.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So thank you, Secretariat, for clarification. Then I will go with a few amendments as related to the decision in the section A. So first of all, we like to introduce a new additional preamble paragraph after the second one, after the paragraph starting with recognizing the need. So during today, but also during the whole week, we heard many concerns of parties around the mandate of this convention and many suggestions coming outside this mandate. We also like to recall and actually ask all parties, especially those who attended COP15 in Montreal and meetings of the working group on global biodiversity framework, to recollect the nature of global biodiversity framework. The nature of global biodiversity framework as was designed is a framework for all, for entire UN system, for whole of society approach, if you remember the first part of the framework. Saying that means that it's not the only responsibility of this convention to implement global biodiversity framework. There are many actors within their mandate, with their roles, and it doesn't mean that all roles need to be played by this convention. We believe it's absolutely clear it's the way GBF was designed. That was the purpose of GBF. And not making it just a only CBD silo. So that's why we want a short paragraph to be included, reading, recognizing and respecting the scope and the mandate of the Convention on Biological Diversity. So in preamble paragraphs, the following two paragraphs starting with building on. We discussed it in a contact group when there is this list like guideline standards. Secretariat, of course, can correct us, but we are not very much aware of standards developed by convention or working groups. So we suggest to delete standards, so it will read as well as guidelines and other tools. And similar in the following paragraph, emphasizing the need. So we will say the same way of the guidelines and other tools related, etc. So the first operative paragraph, as we had also this discussion just some minutes ago, there is a very strong views of parties on different elements of the annex, the program itself, and many square brackets there. We basically prefer to say to keep decided to adopt in square brackets, because we will decide adopt it or not after we clear the all square brackets in the work program. Then we will see what to do with this program. And I have a couple more, but for the sake of time and not moving with details, I will stop here. Thank you very much. Sheshe.
So, Russell, your intervention is noted. Please send the written format, then we will include in brackets. EU first. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Nuestra propuesta, como hemos anunciado antes en la sesión de la mañana, se refiere a la parte de la recomendación, no a la parte de borrador de decisión, pero creo haber entendido que también es ahora el momento de presentarla. ¿Es así?
Yes, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Como comentamos previamente al tratar la versión anterior de este CRP, la Unión Europea y sus Estados miembros valoramos mucho el trabajo realizado, si bien entendemos que quedan algunas cuestiones que avanzar para la finalización y adopción de este programa de trabajo en la COP. En particular, en nuestro grupo de contacto no fue posible entrar en mucho detalle en la definición de los actores y de la priorización de cada una de las tareas. Cuestiones que entendemos que son, no obstante, importante definir para tener un programa de trabajo claro. Es por ello que tenemos la siguiente propuesta de texto a fin de que desde aquí hasta la COP16 se pueda recabar la opinión de las partes, los pueblos indígenas y las comunidades locales y los agentes interesados relevantes para poder avanzar en esa identificación. Nuestra propuesta, por tanto, es como sigue. Si me permite, la leo a continuación en inglés. Sería la inclusión del siguiente texto en la recomendación tras el primer párrafo que dice The Ad Hoc Open-Ended Intersessional Working Group. A continuación se incluiría el siguiente párrafo. Request the Executive Secretary to seek the views of parties, indigenous peoples and local communities, and relevant stakeholders on the actors and prioritization of the tasks identified in the draft program of work, and provide a compilation of views for information for COP16. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. Any changes will be included in the bracket. Please provide a written document. As we are running out of the time, I suggest just share your comments directly without any explanation. Thank you. Chile, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Apoyamos avanzar en el trabajo interseccional como sugiere la Unión Europea. Ahora bien, reiteramos lo manifestado por nuestro país esta mañana. Somos conscientes de la disparidad de condiciones que debilita o derechamente obstaculiza las posibilidades de una adecuada participación en estas instancias, por lo que creemos que, sin perjuicio de discutir el cómo en esta o futuras ocasiones, Chile considera que toda modalidad de trabajo debe asegurar la adecuada y balanceada representación regional y de género, especialmente de los países en desarrollo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Canada.
Thank you, Chair. On the second preambular paragraph, we would like to replace taking into account such recent development as the adoption. We would replace that with that is aligned with and supports the implementation of, and the sentence would continue. On operative paragraph 2, we would like to add at the end of the sentence, in their national reports as part of their assessment of progress in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And finally, on paragraph 5, we would like to replace fully involve, with enable the full and effective participation of, and the sentence would continue, Indigenous people and local communities, and we would add with their free, prior, and informed consent. Thank you.
Thank you. Please provide a written document afterward. I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. And regarding the draft decision, in the third preambular paragraph, with the reference to guidelines, we would suggest adding voluntary before guidelines. The same would apply to the last preambular paragraph, starting with emphasizing. So we suggest adding the implementation of voluntary guidelines. And we will also add a reference to voluntary under the operative paragraph number 2. Regarding the proposal just made by the European Union, we will not be in a position to accept this because, as we understand, there are many elements within the program of work that are in brackets, precisely because there has been no agreement on them. And on a similar basis, Brazil and other parties, since the beginning of the discussions within the contract group, had mentioned that they were yet to be convinced of the added value of having the column actors and the column on priority or time frame. And this also is connected with the discussions of the subsidiary body, because many countries felt that depending on the institutional arrangements that we may implement and agree on, this would also affect how the task should be prioritized or not. And we also take note with concern about the amount of intersessional work that has been taking place and how this could place a strain on developing countries. So we wouldn't favor additional intersessional work because this could actually undermine the inclusivity of some of the discussions. And given that many elements are still in brackets, we would struggle to understand how this collection of views would be undertaken. So we would suggest deleting the proposal from the EU as a recommendation from the ad hoc working group. Thank you.
Thank you. Everything comments so far will be in bracket. No need any explanation. I give the floor to Australia as the last speaker, then we close the floor.
Thank you, Chair. No concerns with the proposal raised by Canada. It's an editorial change, just to note that the footnote that's currently further down, footnote 3, will just need to be brought up to that first reference to FBIC. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. We are going to approve this document. But before this, I give the floor to Secretariat for some explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Secretariat has taken note as of all the requests for additions that were made. They will be placed in square brackets, all of them, except for the one that was proposed by the European Union as a paragraph coming immediately after the first preambular paragraph. The proposal was there. And in that part of the draft decision, there can be no square brackets. Therefore, there was no consensus, and that will not be included in the documents that the chair is proposing to adopt. All the other interventions that were made will be reflected, and I kindly ask you to send in writing to the Secretariat, because we were not able to take all the comments that were dictated. So please send to the Secretariat and we will reflect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to confirm our position not be able to approve the document so far. Thank you.
Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente. Creo que no había podido tomar la palabra antes para pedir dos inclusiones en la decisión, en el párrafo 4, al final de la primera línea, después de communities, including women, youth, and other rights holders. Y las mismas palabras en el párrafo 5, después de communities, include women, youth, and other environmental human rights defenders. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. I noticed you raised the flag before or during my time to close, so it will be noted. DRC, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, pour la parole accordée. Nous voudrions juste demander par votre canal la précision sur la proposition faite par la Colombie. Nous n'avons pas bien saisi cette proposition. Nous voudrions qu'on la donne encore une fois de plus. Merci.
Colombia, please.
Gracias. En el texto que estamos revisando en este momento, en el apartado A, donde menciona la indicación para la conferencia de las partes, numeral 4, que empieza con encourages parties to engage with indigenous people and local communities, incluir el texto including women, youth, and environmental right defenders. Exactamente el mismo texto. Queremos incluirlo en el párrafo siguiente, es decir, el 5, que empieza con urge parties to fully involve. Ese texto iría después de la palabra local communities. Gracias.
Thank you. Russia.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So we already said several times that we can't support the suggestions made currently by Colombia to include environmental human rights defenders, as actually it goes way beyond the global biodiversity framework, even not saying that it's not a mandate of the convention itself, but of other bodies. But even not in the context of the Target 22. Target 22 is not including this group into the elements related to funding, participation, access, nothing of that. It's only talking about the protection. Also, as I understood, so we definitely like to delete it. I understood we will put it in square brackets. Then before those defenders, you need to add the language for paragraph 22 related to disabled people as well. Because actually, in terms of engagement, they are included into those elements, unlike the defenders. And we said already, if you like to go this way, you go with all groups. Yeah, and it still stays in brackets because, again, it's outside global biodiversity framework completely. Thank you.
I give the floor to Secretariat.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to note that I did capture this last intervention. And with your indulgence, Mr. Co-Chair, I would like to propose a way forward, as we have discussed. And this is to put the entire recommendation in square brackets with the amendments that were proposed. And again, I repeat here, except for the one that was proposed by the European Union, because there was no agreement on that one. And that part of the recommendation cannot have square brackets. But starting, the proposal then is to put the entire recommendation after the preamble paragraph that starts with recommends that. There would be a square bracket in front of the A program of work, so that letter A, the square brackets will go before that, all the way to the end of this document. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
DRC.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci beaucoup pour les explications du secrétariat. Nous en prenons bonne note. Et nous savons que, justement, vous l'avez déjà dit, que le texte entier sera entrecroché, comme vous l'avez proposé. Mais ici, si nous avons pris la parole suite à la proposition faite par la Colombie, c'est parce que nous voudrions un crochet particulier sur le concept de défenseur des droits de l'environnement. Merci beaucoup.
Can we approve this document? Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. again, we would like to convey our disapproval for these documents, mainly because of paragraph 5.4 and 5.3, which we consider is without mandate, since we think that we should work only under mandates. If we start creating things without the mandate of our leaders, then there's no limit of what we will be doing. So at this point, Indonesia cannot accept this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. Do you have any comments for the way forward?
Are you asking me, Mr. Chair? Okay. Okay, since the chair is looking at me directly, and of course, you are our leader, Mr. Chair. I've consulted with Capital, and we may consider the way forward if this room approve for footnote under 5.4 and 6.3, at least for Indonesia, as a record of Indonesia's strongly position in this regard. The footnote would be read: for the record, or for greater certainty, Indonesia strongly considers paragraph 5.4 and 6.3 is without mandate and should not even be considered, since it should not be not only bracket, but it should have been deleted. That is our proposal. I can read it again if it's necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any objection to Indonesia's proposal? I give the floor to Togo, even you raised the floor before my announcement.
At once, or can I speak French before?
No interpretation.
Je demandais si je peux continuer en français, comme il disait que les interprètes sont partis. Je continue en français en attendant.
Sorry, there is no interpretation.
Okay. So yes. Sorry for that. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We are supporting the proposal of, or the position of Indonesia, as said above, and we are now making this statement on behalf of Africa, as said during the contact group and in this plenary room. We are not agree to have in this document all aspects that separating indigenous people and local community. So we would like also to have all the documents in bracket. Thank you, Madam.
Russian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We support suggestion from Indonesia, and we're actually happy also that in this footnote, it will be clear that it's Indonesia and also Russia behind this footnote. Thank you.
Thank you. If there is no any objection to Indonesia's comment, can we adopt this document? Approve. Then next, we adopt this document. Now we go through item 9, other matters. We have now reached agenda item 9, other matters. I open the floor for any other matters to be raised. If none, I don't see any requests from the floor. Thank you. Then we go through item 10, adoption of the report. We now come to document WG8j-12 L1, which is the draft report of the 12th meeting of WG8j. The document was distributed, and I hope that all of you had a chance to read it. I now invite the reporter, Ms. Hobes Kikosana from Swatini, to introduce the document. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, you have now before you document CBD-WG8j-L1, which contains the proceedings part of the meeting of this working group. The draft report contains the summaries of the statements made during the 12th meeting of the ad hoc working group on Article 8J and related provisions, and matters regarding the organization of the meeting. I am submitting this document for adoption with the understanding that today's proceedings and approved changes will be incorporated in the final report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Sikosana. I propose that we review the report page by page. Any comments on page 1? Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may seek your guidance, what happened to agenda 9? Is 9 before 10? Should have been do agenda 9 first, so the report will be complete. Because if we finish the report and we do agenda 9, then agenda 9 will not be in the report.
We did.
When is this, Mr. Chair?
We already did it.
If I may ask, when?
5 minutes. We went through item 9 before this item 10, and during that time, I see no any request from the floor on other matters. Okay, Indonesia.
Apologies, Mr. Chair, we didn't realize that. And if we may request your indulgence, Mr. Chair, we would like to to open and conclude Agenda 9.
Okay, please proceed.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. Indonesia delivers this statement on behalf of several members of the OIC group, which includes Indonesia, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Algeria, Egypt, Oman, and Jordan, and other members which might be joining in the later stage in writing. The CBD Convention is one of the few conventions that specifically recognize and supports the existence, concerns, and interests of indigenous people and local communities around the world. In that regard, let me point out that the Palestine represents one of the most biodiversity-rich regions in the world, as it represents the meeting point of 3 continents and many biogeographical zones. However, the lack of sovereignty and continued Israeli illegal occupation practices harms the Palestinian environment and access to natural resources for the local people, and certainly limited what they can achieve what can be achieved by Palestinians to comply with the CBD. In that regard, we consider it is very timely and especially important to raise the issue of the current global concern. The tragic events that is currently happening, the illegal and barbaric attack and forced displacement of the indigenous peoples and local communities of Palestine must be stopped. The Palestinian APLC rights needs to be protected as stated by the Convention and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. It is evident that what we are witnessing amounts to crimes against humanity. The violence, which cannot be justified as self-defense, must end to prevent a worsening humanitarian catastrophe. As of today, as per available information, the death toll from the illegal actions of the apartheid colonial occupying entity of Israel on the Gaza Strip since October 7 has risen to 11,500, including 4,710 children and 3,160 women. The crimes committed by the apartheid occupying power of Israel also caused severe destruction of nature and biodiversity in Palestine. This man-made destruction will have long-term consequences, not only for Palestine, but also to the world. Thus, at this forum, as the CBD also aims to recognize and support the existence, concerns, and interests of indigenous people and local communities, and to ensure the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of biodiversity, it is relevant for us to call for the war crimes to stop, since it would be inhumane to let this situation persist. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Now, let's move to item 10. Any comments on the page 1 of the draft report of the meeting? So I see none. Then we go through page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente. Colombia quiere recordar que cuando abordamos el ítem 7.
Sorry, there is no
sorry. Yes, sorry.
translation. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Colombia wants to remind that when we aboard the item 7 about the joint program of work on the links between biological and cultural diversity. We have a very interesting discussion about the indicators to measure some aspect of the target 22 of the global biodiversity framework. And as a result of this discussion, there were no consensus in the proposal made by Colombia. So Colombia wants to see in their report, under this item 7, the reference to this discussion and the proposal that was made to include the recommendation for the ATEC in order to study indicators to measure the target 22 in reference with ensure the full protection of environmental human rights defenders as it is in the global biodiversity framework. Thank you, Co-Chair.
We take note of what you had comments. Thank you. So with this, we don't need go. Okay, it's the end of this document. No more comments on this report. So this report is adopted. Thank you. Thank you all. As usual, the consolidated report will be reviewed by the reporter for clearance before it is released. We have completed agenda item 10, adoption of the report. We now move to item 11, closure of the meeting. I have a pleasure to invite Mr. David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary of the Convention, to address the meeting. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and let me start by thanking you and your co-chair for your hard work and guidance to us through this week. As we've seen in the last few hours, this hasn't always been easy, but you've nonetheless successfully guided us through this meeting and to the end. And I would like to thank you, and through you, thank the Chinese presidency for your continued support to this process, to the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And to our co-chair from the Indigenous communities, thank you, and through you to thank all of the International Indigenous Forum and Biodiversity, all of the friends of the Bureau for your strong support to the discussions that have taken place this week. This week we have, we started with the in-depth dialogue where we could increase understanding of the role of Indigenous languages and how important they are for the intergenerational transfer of knowledge, innovations and practices, and of the crucial role of women in this respect too. We've also been able to further the work and make important recommendations on the knowledge component of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that will be taken up by the subsidiary body on implementation. And we've also progressed the work on the joint program of work on biodiversity and cultural biodiversity, in particular with some recommendations to SBSTA and the SBSTA process, the ATEG on indicators. We also had the pleasure of hosting, at the beginning of the week, the chairperson of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. And notwithstanding the difficult discussions we've had this afternoon, I think it's very important that we have listened to these recommendations and that COP we'll be able to consider how to take this forward. Of course, the main focus of your work this week has been on the development of the new program of work on Article 8J and related provisions, emphasizing the importance of the role of indigenous peoples and local communities in the work of this convention, and of course of developing proposals for new institutional arrangements. Again, despite some difficulties, you've made significant progress on this week. There's been a lot of very rich discussions in the contact group. These are now reflected in the recommendation to the COP. We obviously can see that much of this is in brackets, will need further discussion, but I think you still should not underestimate the progress that was made this week and the importance of that. The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework clearly acknowledges the important roles and contributions of indigenous peoples and local communities as custodians of biodiversity and as partners in its conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. And that's why the development of this new program of work is so important, to give further practical support to that recognition. And let me also just note that actually just yesterday in the second committee of the General Assembly, in considering the annual decision on the Convention on Biological Diversity and its contribution to the Sustainable Development Agenda, the General Assembly Second Committee also emphasized the importance of indigenous peoples and local communities to the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, and welcomed the process that was established at COP15 and we have been conducting here this week to further develop a program of work on this topic. So I think there is no doubt from the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, from the fact that it and the program of work has been welcomed by the Second Committee and will go to the full plenary of the General Assembly shortly, of the importance of this issue and the importance that the entire international community gives to it. I would like to thank all parties, all representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities, all representatives of women and youth and other parts of civil society, and of all the other stakeholders that have represented here for your hard work in moving us in this direction. We began the week, or before this week, with an international dialogue between indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth and parties, that I think was a very important opportunity for all the parties, the indigenous peoples and local communities and others to listen to each other, to understand, and clearly this need for dialogue will not go away. We will look forward to further dialogues, further ways of understanding each other. We've, I think, recognized the need to understand better different concepts, different cosmovisions, different worldviews, different epistemologies, and different ways of knowing, and it'll be very important that there are opportunities for further discussions and dialogue between here and COP so that we can adopt some strong decisions at COP16. So I'd like to thank you all. I'd like to thank the teams that have been supporting us this week, my colleagues in the Secretariat for their hard work, Olivier Capac and the team, for all the staff, for all the staff that have been working to support this process administratively, also to the interpreters, and to all the staff of this centre. Let me also thank again the Swiss government for hosting us here, for their hospitality. We look forward to returning to Geneva again. In the meantime, I wish you well. Some of you may be staying on for some more hard work on digital sequence information. I wish you all a safe return home, and we'll continue the discussions on this matter at COP16. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Now I give the floor to IPLC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm reading this statement on behalf of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. As our elders said at the beginning of this meeting, we must take into account all of Mother Earth during our deliberations. In our mission to protect the biodiversity of nature and peoples, we make the following observations. The IIFB welcomes a deeper understanding of how the languages of indigenous peoples and local communities protect and nurture biodiversity. We hope that parties will increase their support for language revitalization initiatives and programs. It is recognized that our lands and territories conserve the greatest existing biodiversity in the world. Therefore, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework recognizes the roles, rights, and contributions of indigenous peoples and local community to biodiversity conservation in Section C and in 8 of the 23 targets. Therefore, the IIFB reiterates that the subsidiary body on Article 8J and other provisions of the Convention and its new program of work that we are developing are fundamental tools for achieving the 2030 targets of the framework. The Kunming-Montreal framework will not happen without us. We call on all parties to support its establishment, incorporating the full, effective, and equitable participation of indigenous peoples and local communities at all levels of decision-making and implementation. We iterate that the new program of work must contain specific tasks that produce concrete results aligned with the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework and subsequent ones. Tasks to develop concrete guidelines for biodiversity conservation, Target 3, territorial planning, Target 1, and customary sustainable use of biodiversity, Targets 5 and 9. Tasks to support the fulfillment of Target 19 for direct funding of collaborative actions by indigenous peoples and local communities to implement our priorities at the local level. Tasks to implement Kunming-Montreal GBF's human rights approach, thus respecting, protecting, and realizing the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth, including protecting our environmental human rights defenders and leaders from criminalization, violence, and killings from protecting biodiversity. The 4 indicators on traditional knowledge adopted by previous COPs and reviewed here at this week are highly relevant to the KMGBF. The indicators on land tenure and on effective participation of indigenous peoples and local communities, women and youth in decision-making and implementation of biodiversity are especially important. Substar 26 and COP16 should consider this as additional headline indicators to fill current gaps in the Kunming-Montreal GBF monitoring framework. A new subsidiary body on traditional knowledge can provide further expertise for operationalization and implementation. The GBF expresses its willingness to continue to participate in the deliberations and in the construction of proposals to guarantee the life of Mother Earth and all humanity. Biodiversity and cultural diversity are vital bases for renewing human relations with nature towards the vision of Biodiversity 2050. It is important to continue opening spaces for dialogue and mutual understanding and conditions for the full, active, and proactive participation of Indigenous peoples and local communities. In this line, we express our concern about the dynamics of the negotiations by documents in brackets. And we hope we thank the parties that we have strongly supported the explicit mention of Indigenous women and girls in the new work program institutional arrangements. We believe that respectful and peaceful dialogue, flexibility, and political will of parties are essential to make the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework a reality. We thank all our financial partners, especially the contributors to the voluntary fund, for our assistance to participate at WG8-12. Thank you very much, co-chairs.
Thank you, IPLC. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, after 5 days hard work, we ultimately finished all the items. Please allow me to express my deep appreciation to all delegates from all parties and the stakeholders, as well as my co-chair, Ms. June Rubis, all Bureau members, for your hard work, constructive engagement, and the spirit of cooperation and compromise during the past 5 days and the whole process. My sincere appreciation also goes to the government of Switzerland for hosting us these days, and for Mr. David Cooper, the acting executive secretary of the convention, and its dedicated team who keep all aspects of this meeting going on. I also want to express my sincere appreciation for the collaborative spirit and engagement demonstrated by each and every one of you. The past week is indeed very intensive and productive. We listened, we exchanged, we debated in some way, and finally, we are here. We reached some consensus. We met different opinions, but rather importantly, we know each other's concerns and deviations better. This is quite meaningful while we are marching on the road implementing GBF together. By fostering open communication, we can not only solving challenges, but also paving the way to meet our commitment to the framework so that we can move toward the same direction for the path ahead of us. As we continue our journey forward together, your contributions are invaluable, and I am confident that by working hard in hand, we will achieve remarkable outcomes. Wish you a safe journey home, and I look forward to our next meeting. With this, I now declare the 12th meeting of the ad hoc open-ended Intersessional Working Group on Article AJ and the related provisions of the Convention on Biodiversity closed.